Iron Man and Man of Steel are very similar movies, so I'm going to break down the many similarities between these movies, and the one scene that I think highlights why one of them gave us the most successful film franchise of all time, and the other one gave us one of the most controversial film franchises of all time. First, let's discuss the many similarities. Each film launches a superhero cinematic universe, and they're about powerful men who aren't living up to their potential. Each of these men inherited their powers. Tony's father designed the first arc reactor, while Clark's father sent him to Earth. They're both orphans, and their love interests are intelligent, red-headed women who discover the hero's double life around the midpoint of the movie. There's an important father figure in their lives who dies in a heroic act that teaches the hero a valuable lesson.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
And a father figure also discourages the hero from making a difference.
We're ironmongers. We make weapons.
My name on the side of the building.
And what we do keeps the world from falling into chaos.
Oh, Clark, you have to keep this side of yourself a secret.
They each have a run-in with the military who have to learn to trust the hero, and there's a fun first flight sequence that cuts to extreme close-ups of the hero's face to show his exhilaration. The villain in the movie was an acquaintance of the hero's father and wants to control the power that the father left to his son, meaning the arc reactor and the Kryptonian Codex. The villain ends up stealing the hero's power for the final fight. Obadiah makes an Iron Man suit and Zod gets superpowers. But the hero gains a temporary edge because he's had these powers longer and is better adjusted to them.
My suit is more advanced in every way.
How'd you solve the icing problem?
Icing problem.
The hero inadvertently creates the final conflict. Clark sets off the beacon that alerts Zod, and Tony provides the designs for the Ironmonger suit. The villain goes on a rampage in the middle of the hero's hometown, and then the hero has to defend the world from technology created by his own people. To defeat the bad guy, the hero has to use the brilliance and legacy of his father, and he's aided by the love interest in the final act. But the most important similarity between these movies is their common dramatic question. Should the hero unleash their great powers upon the world, or is the world not ready for this kind of weaponry? Like I said, there are a couple similar scenes that set these movies apart from one another. First, let's talk about Iron Man, and more specifically, the most important character in the entire MCU, Yinsen. He doesn't get a lot of attention, but without this guy, there's no Iron Man, no Avengers, no Spider-Man, and no Reverse Snap. Now at first, Tony dismisses him. After all, he's famous, and this is just some guy in a cave.
We met once, you know, at a technical conference in Bern.
He takes Yinsen for granted, even though he saved his life. And it takes him several hours or even days to even ask the guy's name.
What do I call you?
My name is Jensen.
And this is perfectly in character for Tony. He doesn't interact with people. He doesn't even like being handed things.
As soon as possible.
I don't like being handed
That's
things.
fine, because I love to be handed.
He doesn't interact with any stranger except a reporter, and that's only because Happy says she's attractive. So he's a narcissistic, socially awkward guy. Yinsen slowly changes that. They open up to each other.
Got a family?
Yes. And you, Stark?
And Tony genuinely seems interested in someone besides himself, which makes Yinsen's sacrifice mean even more. When Tony is first charging up the armor, it takes a long time to buffer. Yinsen realizes that it won't be ready in time, and he decides to risk his own life, even though he's a surgeon and not a soldier. His death scene is a real gut punch, even though we knew it was coming. He reveals that his family has been dead this entire time.
My family's dead. I'm going to see them now, Stark.
Tony doesn't want to accept that Yinsen's death is beyond his control.
Come on. We gotta go. Move for me. Come on, we got a plan. We're gonna stick to it.
But this moment shows Tony that the world doesn't always follow plans. People die, and that makes life precious. Then, as Tony realizes this, he says,
Thank you for saving me.
and it's the first time he thanks anyone for anything in this movie. It might be the only time. It's when he acknowledges that this man is essential, not just to his survival, but to his spiritual awakening. And then, with just a couple sentences, Yinsen gives Tony's life purpose.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
Yeah, it's simplistic and a little derivative of Saving Private Ryan.
Earn this.
But in this moment, Iron Man is born. Now what's interesting is that Man of Steel has a very similar scene, although it sets the hero on a different path because these are different movies with totally separate philosophies. The theme of Iron Man, and really all of the MCU, is, well, I'll let Uncle Ben say it.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Tony learns that he has a moral right to use his gifts to improve the world. This is true of nearly every MCU hero. This follows the idea of exceptionalism, that among us there are exceptional people who stand above the rest of humanity and they owe it to humanity to improve the world. Now, Man of Steel deals with two warring viewpoints. The first is exceptionalism as expressed by Jor-El.
Not if you guide them, Cal. Not if you give them hope. You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards.
And the other side of this is objectivism. This philosophy, invented by Ayn Rand, says that the only moral purpose we have is to pursue our own happiness. Jonathan Kent does not encourage his son to be a hero. He wants him to hide his abilities so he can decide for himself how best to use them. He even argues that Clark maybe should have let his friends die in a bus accident.
What was I supposed to do? Just let them die?
Maybe.
This philosophy of self over community is expressed in stark terms in the film's sequel.
You don't owe this world a thing.
But the Kent's primary reason for keeping Clark's abilities hidden is because they're worried about how people will handle the news.
When the world finds out what you can do, it's going to change everything.
Now, this idea is externalized by the tornado sequence, the moment when Man of Steel turned really, really dumb. The sequence begins with Clark frustrated, wanting to use his powers to do good.
I just want to do something useful with my life.
So farming, feeding people, that's not useful.
The argument turns ugly, and he says things that he'll regret for the rest of his life.
I don't even know why I'm listening to you. You're not my dad.
They run into a tornado, which, sure, it's Kansas, these things happen. Everyone gets out of their cars and runs to the overpass, which is pretty realistic, although in a twister you're better off hiding in a ditch. But overall, this is not a well-staged sequence, and that makes it feel dumb, not dramatic. Let me explain. Clark and John stare at the funnel clouds like they've never heard of a tornado before. John runs headfirst into danger to be a hero. The woman tells John that she's stuck! But then he just pulls the kid out with no problem. Why was this so easy? Because they needed a reason for him to be in danger and to move Clark out of harm's way. Now, this twister is far too close to the traffic jam, and the wind is barely blowing. The hay is actually still on this truck. Now, I point this out not to nitpick, but because this is supposed to be an emotional low point. If anything about this reality feels off, then the emotional payoff doesn't work. And none of this feels real. Then we get this incredibly contrived and ridiculous scene. John is saving this little girl, and then Martha points out that they left the dog behind. Now look, I love dogs. I love my cats, and I'm sure that this is a great dog. But there's not a mother on earth who would suggest putting her family's life at risk to save a dog. Or at least my mom wouldn't. How about yours? John won't let Clark go after the dog, I'm assuming, so he'll be able to protect Martha.
Get your mom to the overpass.
So then, John saves the stupid dog and almost gets crushed. Now, this is an homage to this scene from the original Superman, when Lois is crushed by an earthquake and Superman has to admit that there are some people he can't save. Some events are beyond his control, just before he reloads the mission from his last save point, and rescues her anyways. Alright, so John has a busted leg and can't run. Clark wants to save him, but there's witnesses, so John won't let him. This is stupid. Clark could have run into the tornado, saved his dad, and everyone would have just thought that it was some kind of miracle. And none of this feels real or believable, so the intended emotional response falls flat. Instead of walking away from this scene thinking, wow, John died so Clark could keep his secret until the world was ready, what a sacrifice, we're actually asking questions like, really? A dog? Or noticing how terrible the tornado visual effects are. None of this resonates, for me at least. But, even worse, the movie abandons this conflict about Clark revealing his identity just a few minutes later. All through the movie, Clark kept his identity a secret because of how it would affect humanity. Even Perry mentions this.
Can you imagine how people on this planet would react?
The movie is setting up a clear, heroic choice for Clark. Does he accept his great power and trust in himself to lead humanity forward? Does he trust humanity to follow? But mostly, does he dare tell humanity that they are not alone in the universe? And just when it seems like Clark is about to make his decision, Zod shows up and makes it for him. After Zod threatens the planet, Clark really doesn't have a choice anymore. There's no doubt he'll reveal who he really is because Zod has already told the people of Earth that there are aliens living among them. And there's a little bit of Clark deliberating during this oh-so-subtle metaphor for Christianity, but the outcome is inevitable. This is a real bummer. The entire emotional arc is rendered useless the moment Zod shows up. The equivalent would be if Stane used Tony's designs to make an Iron Man suit first, and then Tony had to counter with his own suit. And then Tony would have been passive instead of driving the story himself. And this is why Pa Kent's death was really a waste. He died so Clark could choose, but the choice was taken away from him. So I would have made this one little tweak. John's pinned in the car. Suddenly, the car's roof rips open, and it's Clark. There's debris flying everywhere, concealing them from the view of the people under the overpass. He pulls out his dad, but the wind rips him away, so Clark squeezes his father's arm way too hard, and his dad cries out in pain. Alarmed, Clark lets go so he'll stop hurting his father, and then his dad is blown away. This is one of Superman's greatest fears in the comics, losing control.
I feel like I live in a world made of cardboard, always taking constant care not to break something, to break someone.
He's unsure of his powers, and so he's unsure of his place in the world. So revealing himself to Zod is less about can humanity handle my existence, and more of a personal challenge where he has to overcome his own self-doubts. This would have fit in well with the movie's flashbacks of Clark learning to control his powers and feeling like he doesn't belong. But that's just my opinion. Man of Steel pins its emotional arc on a poorly staged scene that the movie quickly renders pointless, while every event in Iron Man creates a problem that forces Tony to rise to the occasion. What are your thoughts on these movies? Tell me in the comments below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.